Well, I was going to say I'm not into Spike Milligan, who I think on his headstone he's got, "I told you I was crook." I mean, Spike had a bloody great sense of humour. I haven't got that sense of humour.
Welcome to The Final Encore, a show exploring the life and legacy of some of Australia's most interesting characters as they join me in the studio funeral parlour to reflect on their life by planning for their death. I'm your host, Sam McConkey, and with me in the funeral parlour studio today is cricketing legend Ian Chappell. Ian played 75 tests for Australia through the 70s, captaining the team from 1971 through to 1975, before becoming a central figure in the breakout World Series cricket organisation. Ian is known as one of the greatest cricket captains of all time, particularly for his integrity, for his competitiveness, and for the fierce loyalty he engendered within his team. After retiring from cricket in 1980, Ian became a fixture of Australian media, both as a sports journalist and commentator, and became part of ushering in cricket to a new era, including very much myself. Ian, Tony Greig, Richie Benno were the soundtrack of my summers for as long as I can remember. Thanks for joining me on the show. Before we get into planning your funeral, a topic I know you've spent a bunch of time thinking about already, I want to start with your perspective on life and death generally. You once told me over lunch, life is a one-innings game and you're just trying your damnedest not to run yourself out. What did you mean by that?
Well, I'm not sure when it came to me, but fairly early, I think I decided, there wasn't going to be a second innings. This is it. I've heard mates of mine say this is no dress rehearsal. So there were all ways of this creeping into my mind, trying not to run myself out. I guess that meant that I knew I was going to die, but hopefully you were going to go without running yourself out. In other words, bringing yourself to a short end. I had what I would class as the good fortune. My father died pretty young, 64, but Jean, my mother, she went to 91 and a half. And late in her life, I got the feeling that she was ready to go. And I remember sitting down with her and saying, "Jean, are you ready to go?" And she said, "Yeah, I'm ready to go." And I'd probably thought about death and thought that, I have to come to terms with this. But that convinced me in my own mind that I have to convince myself that, you're never going to be happy about dying, but I've got to die not fighting it. I've got to die thinking, well, my time has come. I've had a good time on this earth. It's over now. And so I die peacefully, I guess, is what I'm looking at, rather than die fighting it to the end. I think that would be, I don't know about horrible, but it wouldn't be very nice.
Do you think the pragmatic attitude towards death, the accepting your own mortality, has helped you sort of enjoy the moment, make better decisions in the time, and just generally experience life different from those who are refusing to accept their mortality?
And it's probably a personal thing, so everybody's going to see it differently. But my feeling has always been that, once I can come to grips with it, not thinking, there's another life ahead of me, and sort of thinking, well, I'll do a lot more things then, coming to the conclusion that if I want something done, I better do it now because I'm not going to get another chance. I think that has helped. Whether it makes you make better decisions, well, I hope you always make good decisions, but you find in life that you don't always make the best decision. Everybody's going to make some mistakes. I guess through captaincy, I figured that there's going to be errors along the way, but you just try and learn from any errors that you make. And two, if you make too many, well, you'll get the sack. And so, I had that reinforced pretty regularly through my cricket career and then my life afterwards as a journalist stroke commentator. You always knew that you make too many mistakes and they won't want you here. Yeah.
Before we get to planning your funeral, Ian, you've been to a few recently. What makes a good funeral in your mind?
Personally, what I'm doing, prepaid, paid some money, set some money aside for the club where I go pretty regularly to have a function, provide drinks and a bit of food. I think that's ideal as far as I'm concerned. Now, what they say about me, one, I'm not going to know, and two, I mean, it's pretty harsh, I guess, to say I don't care, but they're going to say what they want to say anyhow, and hopefully the bulk of it will be that he was a decent person and he lived a decent life, because I've always thought, sure, you might be a cricketer, a journalist, whatever, but you have to, along the way, be a decent human being. And so I went to a funeral of another mate of mine who I played baseball against. Pepe played for New South Wales. And that was really good. They had a function in a function room. We all stood around, had a beer, and we were talking about Pepe. And then they threw the microphone open. They said, anybody wants to come up and say something about Pepe, go for your life.
Yeah. What I personally really like about that style of funeral is often you have a very narrow relationship with a particular person. You played sport with them, you worked with them, you went to school with them, and a lot of your memories and a lot of your stories are specific to the arena in which you knew them. That type of funeral, you start to learn, oh, they did this and I never knew this, and oh, it was this kind of guy and he did this other thing. And it's something nice about all of these stories of someone's life being stitched together in a way that you wouldn't otherwise have had the opportunity to hear.
That's very true. I mean, I found out things about Pepe. I mean, I knew that he worked at a university, he was pretty smart, he was into neurology, but I heard things there and I thought, oh, crikeys, Pepe was...
more than a baseball player.
He was a bit more than what I thought he was, you know.
You've gone to great lengths to plan your own funeral, and we'll get into some of that in a second. But what was the reason or the mindset behind going to such great lengths to plan out all elements of your funeral?
I don't want to leave a mess for, Barbara Ann, my daughter Amanda. I don't want to leave a mess for them to clean up and tidy up and for them to have to find money. So I thought, if I can just quarantine some money, that's going to be used for my funeral. It's prepaid. It's all set to go. All they need to do is just turn up and celebrate my life.
All right, let's get into the funeral plan, Ian. First question is music. What's the soundtrack to the Ian Chappell farewell?
Well, I've picked out a playlist, as they call it now. I've been churning through it. I've been playing it a bit at home, mostly in the car. One that I really hope the message gets through is Simple Song of Freedom, which is by Bobby Darin. And it's a song about no war.
Yeah.
And that was something that I felt pretty strongly about throughout my life, or have felt strongly about. And so I would like that message to get through. A lot of the other songs are music that I like. Obviously, rock and roll plays a big part because, I was 13 in 1956 when rock and roll really kicked off. So rock and roll is a big part of, or was a big part of my early life and remains so. Then there's a couple there, obviously one's a tribute to Barbara Ann, my wife. And then there's one there where there's a dog barking at the start of the record. And it's always stuck in my mind. It's a Rod Stewart number. We had Rastus, who was a naughty dog, but a very, very good character. And he'd be in the car and he'd hear the dog barking and he'd start looking around for the other dog in the car. So there's a couple like that, there's a Willie Nelson song, The World's Going to Pot. I mean, Willie was a great songwriter. So just songs like that amused me. I've got a couple of humour things, a Monty Python one, a Mel Brooks one.
It's quite the collection, Ian. It's a musical journey you're taking people on.
Yeah, well, I don't know how much they're going to hear because you're going to be talking and so on. The humour ones, I mean, Monty Python was bloody funny, and it's a funny skit. Mel Brooks, bloody funny. But also, there's a bit of a message there as well.
Totally.
Yeah. And so you hope that people would hear what's said.
Got it. Before we leave the topic of music, I got to ask, one of the more surprising things I think about the life of Ian Chappell was that you were in a schoolboy choir a long, long time ago. Tell us about how that came to be, Ian.
I looked through the list and there were things there like gardening, things, woodwork, things that I just one, I wasn't interested in, and
Yeah.
two, wasn't going to be any good at them. I saw the choir and I thought, oh, well, I'll give that a go. So I went in the choir, and I remember we did the Pirates of Penzance up on the stage in the main hall at Prince Alfred College. And the only feedback I got, and I think I got it from my mother, is, why didn't you do your jacket up? there was no talk about. I'm not sure what song. I mean, I sang, but I think I was just part of the choir, and hopefully they couldn't hear too much of what I was singing.
From music to food, what's on the menu at your funeral, Ian?
Well, that'll be set menu. It's finger food. It's whatever they provide. The wine, I think, will be good, and they've got choice of beer and wine.
Let's talk photos. I know you've already planned out a whole bunch of photos that will be on display. Are there one or two photos, Ian, that stand out as must-haves?
I guess in some ways I'm a traditionalist, but in other ways I like people who have got a mind of their own and they think for themselves, and this is what I want to do. So the photos I've got there, they're good memories for me. They're people who I spent some time with. I enjoyed their company. Obviously, wife, daughter, brothers, father, mother. Those photos, I wanted to get them there just to, I guess, show my appreciation for the fact that they played a part in my life, and a very strong part. And then others are just mates, pets. There's a hell of a lot of pet stuff there. I guess it may not mean much to the people who are there, but it'll mean a bit to me. And I guess that in going through and choosing them, I guess that's the feeling that I get. Well, I'm choosing the ones that I like, and they have a relationship to me. Hopefully, the odd person will, gee, that one, I remember that.
Yeah. Is there a photo that you'd love to add to the collection that you don't have yet?
No, if I haven't got it, it can't be that important.
Is there a future moment that you're looking forward to capturing and putting in that collection?
Well, there's probably one that's in the collection. It's in my photos, but I don't think I've put it in the collection. It's me sleeping on the couch at Northamptonshire. I used to see Rodney Marsh a lot. Every time I'd go to Adelaide, I'd always catch up with Rodney. I used to say to Rodney, I got into a bit of trouble in my cricketing life, Rodney, and pretty well all of it was down to you. And in fact, I think I sent him that photo. I said, you caused this. And the obvious one is the photo where they dug up the pitch at Headingley in 1975. So they dug up the pitch and they poured oil on the pitch. And the bloody phone rings about 7 a.m, and it's the manager of the Australian team, Fred Bennett. Quick, get down to my room. I said, right, I'll just have a shower, Fred. You haven't got time for a shower. Just get down here. So I didn't even, I don't know why, I didn't even pull the curtains back to let a bit of light in. I could see where the clothes were, and I grabbed them, put them on. And I mean, they weren't poor. There was a decent pair of slacks. It was a Pringle sweater. But I couldn't see where my shoes were, and I could see that there were some flip-flops there because you could see the colours. So I put them on. Went down to Fred's room and he said, we've got to get down the ground because they've dug up the pitch. And so that's why you see the photo with Tony Gregg all dressed up with a tie and a jacket, and there's me, casual clothing with a pair of flip-flops on.
Because you couldn't open the blinds, or you forgot to open the blinds.
Well, yeah, and Marsh had kept me out late.
Yeah.
Again, I used to blame him. I'd say, that's another problem you caused me. But most of the problems that Rodney caused me were enjoyable.
From photos to highlights, Ian, your life will be played back at your funeral through a variety of means. What's the single highlight from your cricketing career you'd love everyone to relive?
As a player, the worst thing that can happen to you is to lose the Ashes. I mean, England still are, obviously, when you listen to the current players talking, but they certainly were in my time. They were the enemy, and they were the team that you had to beat and you didn't want to lose to. So I was part of the 70-71 side that lost the Ashes to a very good England captain in Ray Illingworth, fortunately as a captain in Sydney in 74-5. And I still remember the last wicket going. Ashley Mallett bowling, Jeff Arnold batting, inside edge, Greg at bat pad, Greg took the catch. And I still remember to this day, Rodney Marsh swung straight around with his glove hand, put his glove hand out to shake hands, and he said, "We've got the bastards back, the bastards being the Ashes." And so I remember that, but mostly I remember the party we had that night after the Test win. It was a very good party, as most of the parties were, because you generally only have parties when you win. As I say, I'm not into cricket photos and things, but that was a very good memory.
What about lowlights, Ian? You mentioned regrets earlier. Two-part question. How do you approach regret generally? And are there any standout moments of regret where you'd like to go back and have another crack at something?
There's a lot of regrets when you get out, usually getting out for a low score, and you walk off the field muttering to yourself, how could I be such a stupid bastard as to do that? And the players knew me pretty well. I really wasn't a sane person for half an hour after I got out because I was cranky. And you go through all the ramifications, you know. It was a good ball, bloody lucky catch, shithouse umpiring decision. You go through all that. And then generally, in my case, after about half an hour, you'd sort of say, and generally I would spend time under the shower. You know, I would keep out of everyone's way as much as I could. Generally, after about a half an hour, maybe, and that wasn't a very good shot. And that, to me, was when you were starting to be honest. From there on, you had a chance of sorting out. And then you'd start to think, well, why did I play such a stupid shot? Try, you know, and then try not to do it again, and you would do it again because you were bloody stupid. But I've said many times that I think we learnt, or not I think, we did learn more from our losses than our wins. Because generally with wins you play pretty well. With losses you've made some mistakes, so learn from them.
One of the regrets I've heard you speak about publicly before is being talked out of speaking at your own father's funeral. Interested in your reflections on that and how at all, if at all, it's changed your views on your own funeral.
Yeah, it was important. And one of the reasons why it was important, Martin and I were quite similar in a lot of ways. And one of the things that I really regret, and this is probably my number one regret, Martin told me something at some stage, or I must have still been playing. And I don't know whether I wasn't listening, had the shits, I don't know what. But I said to Martin, how many bloody test matches have you played? Which is a horrible thing to say because Martin gave the three of us, and Jean, they did everything they could to give us the opportunity to get to the top, and they achieved that. So it was a horrible thing to say to Martin. I'd probably thought about it after and thought, Jesus, I should apologise to him. Sometimes apologies didn't come easily to me. I'd never apologised to Martin for saying that. And I wanted to, at his funeral, because he died, boom, like that, and so I didn't get the chance to sit with him. And I wanted to, at his funeral, make that apology. I always regretted that. And I've said to a few people, you know, talking to them before the funeral and said, make sure you speak at your father's funeral, you know, and say what is on your mind. You talk about regrets, that would be number one for me.
Let's move on to your eulogy then, Ian. I know you said you won't be there. Perhaps you don't care, but what do you hope they say about you? What's the impact you hope you've left?
Quite right. I won't be there. I won't hear it. People are going to say what they want to say. But I guess if you ask me what do I hope happens, I hope that somewhere along the lines they think that I was a decent human being. Because they can think whatever they like about my captaincy, my cricket, my journalism, whatever. But if they thought that I was a decent human being, that would mean a lot to me.
What does that mean to you, decent human being?
that you've lived your life. I mean, again, you make mistakes, and crikey, I've made plenty. You talked about integrity before. I think one of the things, or not I think, I know, a couple of the things I got from my mother were a sense of fair play, integrity. I mean, Jean said to me, don't let money rule your life. You've got to have some money, obviously, but don't let it rule your life. And it never ruled Jean's life, and that shaped my approach. But also the justice side, the fair play, those things came through pretty strongly from Jean. You know, I've seen a lot of things in life, and you think to yourself, would I have had the guts to do that? And there are some things that I think I might not have had the guts to do it, but you wish that you would. So the fact that I showed a bit of integrity, that I had the guts at times to talk about things and to thump the table, that's, I guess, what I mean by living a decent life.
Two of the things that you've thumped your hand on the table hardest about has been refugees and racism, particularly racism in Australia. Where did the motivation or the mindset for that come from, and what impact do you hope you've had across those two causes?
Again, I'd put a lot of that down to Jean. You know, certainly the justice and the fair play side of it. And I'm not downgrading Martin's contribution, because that was more on the field, I think, whereas Jean's was more off the field. You know, I've said many times that as a former Australian captain, you have a louder voice, and there are times when I think you need to use that louder voice for people who have got no voice. And I've got to thank Barbara Ann as well, because, you know, with the refugees, I remember sitting there and I was watching television, and it was at the time of the Tampa crisis, and I really had the shits with what was going on. And I was railing at the television, and Barb brought dinner down, plonked it down, and heard me railing at the television. And she said, you know, yelling at the television won't do a lot of good. She said, you know that bad things happen when good people do nothing. And that left a imprint with me. So, you know, it wasn't an original quote, but Barbara's timing was perfect. And that's what made me get off my bum and do something. So that was really important. Racism has always bothered me, and every now and again you get to the point where you think, bugger it, I've had enough of this. And yes, on the racism side was making the speech when I was inducted into the Hall of Fame and saying that the 1868 Aboriginal side should have a number.
Yeah.
And congratulations to the board. They found a way to do it, and I think they found a good way to do it, because it was always said to me, we can't just put them at the front and call them 1 to 15 and then push everybody else back. And so what they did was they put an A, so it was 1A, 2A, 3A. And the A standing obviously for A in numeral, but also Aboriginal.
Yeah, right.
So there's not a lot of times when I give the board credit, but that was one where I think they did a really good job. And the important thing was that they recognised that team, because, in my opinion, they were the forerunner of all the Australian teams that came after. And you couldn't see them as anything else other than an Australian side. So, you know, that was another time when I felt that I had that louder voice and I had to say something.
What do you hope it is? If you were to summarise your mantra in a few words, what would it be?
Well, I was going to say I'm not into Spike Milligan, you know, who I think on his headstone he's got, I told you I was crook. I mean, Spike had a bloody great sense of humour. I haven't got that sense of humour. No, I think if they just feel that I was a decent human being, I'd be happy with that. But people are going to have their own opinion, and I ain't going to change it, and I'm certainly not going to be there to change it. So whatever they want to think, they'll think. But if they do happen to think that I was a decent human being,
Be happy
that
with
would be fine. Yeah.
Ian, it's been a great pleasure. Thank you for reflecting on your life by planning for your death with me. Very much appreciate your time, and I wish you all the best for the many years ahead from here.